The dating landscape has changed over the last couple of years, with some people opting to online date, e-date, etc. But now it has become easier than ever to chat someone up, set up a date, and go from there. Although it has also become easier than ever to talk to a person whom you truly don't know. It is easy to put on a mask while you text, but what about when you actually meet? That is where today's story takes us. We are going to be looking into a now deleted Reddit post. This case is widely available, but is most famous or infamously known for a few details. One being that the woman in the post texted the quote unquote soulmate over 65,000 times. Allegedly, all of the information is true, and the follow up is determining what actually happened. I will now be reading the now deleted Reddit post. A lot of people may have heard about this girl. She was all over the news after she stalked a guy, bombarded him with 65,000 texts, and broke into his house all over one date. We met shortly after she went on that date with him, and we were friends for a while before she broke into his house. At first, she seemed like a nice, albeit quirky person. I met her when I spent a couple months visiting the west coast of the US in summer 2017. I thought she was cute, and we spent a little time together. We were living next door to each other for a few weeks, and we were really never more than friends. I stopped having any sort of non-platonic feelings after she started to talk a lot about a guy that she met on some dating website. Apparently he was her soulmate, and she had somehow been guided to him by following her birth calendar. I would only later come to know that they had only been on one date, and he never spoke to her again. I thought this was kind of weird, but I enjoyed our conversations for the most part, and she was funny and nice, so we remained friends. Eventually, she moved on to short flings with a guy and then another girl from Tinder. All the while still talking to me about this guy that she was going to marry, saying that she liked how jealous he got when she would tell him about hooking up with other people. A couple of weeks later, she started to get really erratic. I confronted her a few times about how she was acting, and she told me that she had been recently stopped taking her meds, but would start taking them again. She came home one day and decided to tell me that she had a court date coming up for a DUI. I have no idea if this is actually true, but if there's a way to find out, it happened in Arizona and her name is pretty easy to find, so someone could look it up if they wanted to know. Her plan was instead to leave to a country in South America. I told her what dumb idea this was, and even though she went all the way to the airport in a different city, she wound up coming back. Apparently, her soulmate was no longer answering her texts, and she took that as a sign that she should drag her ass back to where he was and fix the relationship. She was upset that he may be seeing other people, even though it seemed okay to her that she was seeing other people. Later on, she told me that she had texted him if he blocked her, she would know that means he wanted her to come find him. Obviously, he ended up blocking her, and obviously again, that did not go over well with her. So, she moved a couple of days later, and the summer was ending, and I moved back to the East Coast. I did not hear from her for a little while, but when she started talking to me again through WhatsApp, she seemed like she was doing better. She told me she had found a roommate and was working on her art, and just generally seemed like she was in a better place. I was happy to have my friend back and healthy, but that did not last longer than a couple of months. Eventually, her behavior started to seem erratic again. She was sending dozens of texts at a time, and they were all over the place. Several of them had to do with her soulmate and how she was still following him, even though he had called the police and blocked her. I told her to stop, try to get her to take her meds, and tried to reason with her 100 times. I was on the opposite side of the country and had no way of getting in touch with her family, who I never knew much about, or friends to try and get them to help her. She was a kind person and a good friend when she was taking care of her mental health, and I cared about her, but I couldn't force her to take care of herself. One day, I set her aside some time to call her, and I told her that she was overwhelming me and that she really needed to reach out to her family or someone who could really help her. She told me I couldn't do that because she needed to stay with me or she would have to go back to her ex-husband. I don't think any of this is true, but she thought her ex-husband was going to have her killed or followed, that he had the entire police force in his pocket and had paid off her family to give him intel on her whereabouts and what was going on in her life. I had just moved for a job and I lived in a small studio in a big city. I had no room for anyone to stay long term, and I wasn't about to do that anyways, since she was starting to scare me at this point. She asked me if I was still living at my address, which really freaked me out because I had never given her my address or put it anywhere online, and she wouldn't tell me how she got my address. I asked her to leave me alone and told her we wouldn't be friends anymore unless she took some steps to get better. She obviously did not take this well. Though I hated my tiny cramped apartment, the reason I was drawn to it was because it had great security. It was actually on the upper floors of a hotel, although the hotel rooms were much nicer than the residence. And no one was allowed through the residence elevators unless the resident had given their name to security ahead of time, and the guest had to show some ID. After what happened next, I loved my cramped little apartment because the staff kept me safe. It had been over a week since I had talked to her because I blocked her number and I blocked her on WhatsApp. She tried texting me from 4 different phone numbers using text-free, etc. But I just blocked them all and never responded. I was walking home from work one day and I was sure I saw her across the street from my building, but it was storming out and I didn't get a good view anyway. I rushed upstairs and calmed myself down in my apartment. Maybe I was just being paranoid. It is a big city. Lots of people have brown hair and glasses. I'm just worried about her. But then the phone rang. The desk was calling to see if I'd forgotten to let him know I had a visitor. My heart sank. I asked him who was waiting. They said they tried asking for her name or ID, but she just walked out, and I knew it was her from the way they described her. I texted a mutual friend from over the summer. I wasn't really close with him, so we hadn't stayed in touch. But he told me that she had lost it, and that he had blocked her too. Apparently, she had gone back on the dating site that she met her quote-unquote soulmate on, and found someone who looked just like him in my city. She was convinced that it was him, and had to come to find him. This was a very touristy city, but there was just no way this guy had coincidentally come out here. I was sure that she had gone bonkers, and I knew she was well aware of where that guy actually lived. I took a page out of her book and used a text-free number to text her that she should leave me alone and I would call the cops if she ever came near me or was in my building again. In retrospect, I shouldn't have contacted her at all, but I was emotional and not using my better judgment. She said she just wanted to know if I could help her find something. Texted back really fucking fast and didn't even try to hide it. Then I deleted the text-free app so she couldn't reach me again. I lived in a very crowded area and I knew she couldn't get into my building, but I was still scared whenever I had to take public transit alone at night or was walking alone through less crowded areas to get home. I had a friend who used to work for the police, but not in this city or at the time that all this happened, and she would drive or walk me home from work whenever she could for a while. She told me I should go ahead and report it, even though they really couldn't do anything since she hadn't heard me, or nothing really had happened. But I was embarrassed, and again, I didn't use my better judgment. I felt like it was my fault for engaging with her for so long. I knew she was mentally unstable, and I would still try to be her friend and help her. Maybe I gave her the wrong idea that I could do more for her. I ended up moving to a new city for another job. After that, and didn't hear from her again. I later found out the reason why was that a couple of months later, she had once again gone back to Arizona and had been arrested for breaking into her soulmate's house and using his bathtub. They found a large knife in her car. I did not want to get into too much detail about her stalking of that guy and what she said about him in our text because I wanted to try and focus more on my personal experience with her instead of this. The woman in question, her name is Jacqueline Ades. She met a CEO of a company on an app called Lexi. This app appears to be dating for quote-unquote higher-end people. So it is obvious that Jacqueline was trying to meet a well-off kind of guy. After a single date, she grew upset at the seeming one-sided conversation she had with the CEO. She later moved to California from Arizona, where she spammed messages to the CEO. This resulted in her being blocked and the CEO attempting to cut all ties with Jacqueline. This was to no avail, however, as she kept finding ways to message him. She found where this man lived and went as far as to issue death threats to the man in question. After this, the man decided that he had enough and went ahead and pressing charges against Jacqueline. At the end of the video, I will put in some of the messages Jacqueline sent to the man, but now, let's just keep digging. Jacqueline was later on interviewed. She says she found herself on a quest of love and in search of the number 33. She claims that the number would constantly be on her mind and trying to follow the number 33 after speaking to a psychic. This psychic told her that she had the same birth chart as Jesus, whatever that means. In conclusion, Jacqueline needs some serious mental help. After the interview, the judge found her not to be suitable to be prosecuted in trial.